I was staring through the floor-to-ceiling glass of my 34th floor office in Chicago, watching the gray sleet coat the city. My desk was a fortress of organized chaos, dominated by a cold espresso and a file regarding a $2 million debt restructuring. The silence was shattered by my phone vibrating, the screen flashing the name Martha. I answered without a greeting, knowing the rhythm of her entitlement. Riley. Darling. It's about that trust fund your grandfather left. Martha began with a manic energy. Skylar is a wreck after her breakup, and she needs a trip to the Maldives to clear her head. So, we've decided we'll be using that $30,000 for her travel and a studio apartment. Isn't it wonderful? I set my pen down, my knuckles white as I watched a taxi slide through an intersection below. I forced my voice into a flat tone and asked, "What exactly do you mean by using that money?" Martha let out an exasperated sigh. "Oh, honestly, didn't I already explain? We're using the $30,000 for your sister. To be blunt, even if you had that money, you'd just hoard it anyway because your life is so dull. It worries me to see you so isolated." Her shallow laughter rattled the speaker. "Oh, and there's just one little problem," she continued, her voice edging with impatience. "We're at the bank lobby, right, Jew? But the clerk insists we need confirmation from you. Just hurry up and give permission over the phone. Your father's getting irritated because the flight is booked for the day after tomorrow. We've already put the hotels on the credit card." I took a slow sip of my coffee, feeling an icy calm settle over my chest. Why does it have to be my money? Martha, why don't you fund her with your own savings? There was a brief pause before she launched into a tirade. How can you be so cold? Helping your sister is your duty. You have no use for that money. I listened until she finished, then spoke with resolve. All right. Everything will be resolved by tomorrow morning. Martha's voice brightened instantly. Oh, thank goodness. I'll let the bank know. She hung up, unaware that my definition of resolved involved a legal scorched earth policy. The vibration of my phone against the glass desk felt like a warning siren as I hit the speaker button, hearing the hollow echo of a bank lobby in the background. Martha didn't even wait for a greeting before snapping. Riley. The manager is standing right here with the paperwork for the $30,000 transfer. So tell him you authorize it immediately. I leaned back, my eyes fixed on a digital clock, and asked in my driest consultant tone, "Is the branch manager aware that the trust indenture specifically prohibits third-party verbal authorizations for sums exceeding $10,000? George's gravelly voice broke in, sounding jagged with frustration as he growled, "Don't start with the technical jargon. Riley, just do what your mother says and stop embarrassing us in public." I tapped a rhythm on my desk, my voice dropping an octave as I replied, "Embarrassment is a choice, George. But bank fraud is a felony. So put the manager on the line before you say something you can't retract." A muffled shuffle followed before a new, professional voice filtered through the speaker, introducing himself as the shift supervisor. "Miss Thorne, I have your parents here with a signed withdrawal request, but we require a secondary verbal verification for a transaction of this magnitude." I adjusted my headset, a cold smile tugging at my lips as I said, "I understand your policy, but I need to confirm the specific purpose listed on that document for my records." Martha chimed in, her voice a frantic stage whisper. "It's for an essential family investment and residential relocation." We already told him. Riley. Just say yes. I ignored her, addressing the supervisor directly while I pulled up my personal banking app. Does the document state that the funds are for a high-risk luxury vacation and a rental deposit on a Gold Coast studio that the beneficiary has not approved? The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of Martha's sharp intake of breath and George's muffled cursing. "Miss Thorne, the application simply lists Family support as the primary reason, the supervisor noted, his tone shifting from helpful to guarded. I stood up and paced the length of my office, my heels clicking against the hardwood as I replied, "Then the application is factually incomplete and commercially non-viable, which means I cannot grant authorization at this time." George's roar was nearly deafening as he shouted into the phone, "You ungrateful brat! We already charged the Maldives flights and the apartment deposit to the emergency card because you said it would be resolved." I stopped at the window, looking out at the city's indifferent skyline while I answered him. "I said it would be resolved, George. But I didn't say it would be funded by me." Martha began to wail, a sound of pure performative agony, crying out, "You're ruining your sister's life." "Riley. She's already packed her bags." I ended the call with a single flick of my finger, whispering to the empty room, "No. Martha, I'm just auditing the truth." The supervisor called back 3 minutes later on a recorded line, his voice now crisp and devoid of any warmth. "Miss Thorne, your parents have left the branch, but they insisted the signature on the $30,000 request was yours, despite your refusal to verify." I sat back down, my fingers hovering over the keyboard as I answered, "If they are claiming that signature is mine, then you are looking at a forged document and an attempted unauthorized withdrawal." I heard him exhaling sharply on the other end, the sound of a man realizing he was standing in the middle of a crime scene. "Understood. Miss Thorne, we will flag this account for immediate fraud investigation and notify our legal department of the discrepancy." I nodded to myself, watching the sleet turn into a heavy downpour as I said, "Please do. And ensure those documents are preserved as evidence, because I intend to hold every party involved fully accountable." Martha sent a text seconds later that simply read, "You are a monster." And I smiled, knowing the real monster was the one who thought they could steal my future and call it family duty. I entered the mahogany-lined office of Harrison and Associates, where the air felt thick with the scent of old paper and expensive tobacco. "Mr. Harrison looked up from a thick manila folder, his expression grave as he gestured toward a leather chair. "Riley, I suspected this day would come, which is why your grandfather insisted on adding a codicil that your parents were never permitted to see," he said, sliding a document across the desk. I scanned the lines, my eyes narrowing as I replied, "He knew they'd try to liquidate the $30,000 the moment he was gone, didn't he?" Harrison nodded slowly, leaning forward. "He knew them better than anyone, Riley. And he explicitly stated that any attempt by Martha or George to access these funds would trigger an immediate audit of their history with the estate." I flipped the page, my breath catching as I saw a redacted report from 2 years ago. Detailed and cold. Legal prosy. "Wait. Is this an affidavit claiming I was deceased in a car accident in Seattle?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of fury and disbelief. Harrison sighed, his eyes full of pity as he answered, "Martha submitted that to the bank while you were working on that merger in London, hoping to claim the death benefit of the trust." I slammed the folder shut, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the quiet room. "She tried to kill me on paper for a payout, and I never even knew," I whispered, the betrayal burning deeper than any financial theft. Harrison reached into his drawer and pulled out a digital recorder. "He left a message for you, Riley, recorded just weeks before his passing, knowing you'd need the strength to do what comes next." I pressed play, and the crackling, weary voice of my grandfather filled the space between us. "Riley, if you are hearing this, they have finally crossed the line, and you must stop being their shield," he said, his tone firm despite his frailty. "The money isn't a gift for them. It's your leverage to buy back your life from their greed." I looked at Harrison, my resolve hardening into something indestructible. The $30,000 is just the beginning. Isn't it? He gave me the keys to the whole kingdom because he knew I'd be the only one to keep the gates locked. Harrison smiled grimly, adjusting his glasses. Precisely. And now that we have proof of their prior attempt at fraud, we can move for a total severance of their claims to any Thorne family assets. We spent the next hour dissecting the trust indenture, finding the specific clauses that turned my grandfather's love into a tactical weapon. If I move the $30,000 now, it triggers the automatic vacancy clause for the Chicago property. Doesn't it? I asked, my mind already 3 steps ahead. Harrison tapped a finger on the signature line. Legally. Yes, as they are technically guests of the trust, not tenants with a lease. I stood up, smoothing my coat and feeling the weight of the past finally lifting. Then let's give them the vacancy notice tonight. Mr. Harrison, and make sure they understand that the ghost of my grandfather is finished paying for their sins. He stood to shake my hand, his grip steady. Consider the bridge burned. Riley, I'll have the formal papers served by courier before the sun goes down. The office door burst open with a violence that rattled the glass partitions as Skylar marched in, her face flushed with a mixture of entitlement and rehearsed tears. Riley, what is this insane letter from a process server saying we have 30 days to vacate the apartment? She screamed, slamming a crumpled legal notice onto my desk beside my laptop. I didn't look up from the spreadsheets, my fingers continuing to tap the keys as I replied. It's a formal termination of your occupancy. Skylar. Written in plain English and backed by the Illinois Property Code. She scoffed, pacing the room in her designer boots that I had likely paid for, and shouted, You can't do this. It's our family home, and Mom already booked the Maldives because you said the bank thing would be resolved. I finally met her eyes, my expression a mask of professional indifference. I said the situation would be resolved. And removing 3 parasites from a property I legally control is the definition of a resolution. The phone on my desk buzzed with a call from Martha, her voice erupting through the speaker the second I hit the button. Riley Thorne. You ungrateful, heartless girl. Your father is having chest pains because of this heartless joke you're playing. I leaned into the microphone, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper as I said, If George is having chest pains, call 911. Martha. But if he's just throwing a tantrum because his free ride is over, tell him to start packing the china. George's voice roared in the background, a guttural sound of pure rage as he yelled, I raised you in this city. I gave you everything. And now you're throwing your own blood onto the street for $30,000? I stood up, smoothing my blazer and looking directly at Skylar, who was now trembling with actual fear. You didn't give me everything. George, you gave me a front row seat to your incompetence while I worked 80-hour weeks to pay the $5,000 monthly rent on that Gold Coast unit you call home. Skylar tried to grab my arm, her voice switching to a desperate, manipulative whine as she pleaded. Riley, please. I have nowhere to go, and my breakup has already destroyed me. You have so much money, it doesn't even matter to you. I stepped back, avoiding her touch with a look of pure disdain. Anesthesia doesn't make the surgery less necessary. Skylar. And your inability to manage your life is no longer my financial burden. Martha began to wail through the phone, a high-pitched, theatrical sob that filled the office. We are your parents. Riley, you owe us for every sacrifice we ever made. I reached down and cut the call, the silence that followed feeling like a physical weight in the room. The only sacrifice you ever made was my childhood. Martha. And the debt has been settled in full. I turned to the internal intercom and spoke clearly to my assistant in the lobby. Anesthesia. Please have security escort my sister out of the building immediately. She is no longer a guest. Skylar's jaw dropped, her eyes darting toward the door, as two uniformed guards appeared in the glass frame. "You're actually doing this? You're ruining us over a stupid travel fund?" she hissed, her face contorting into an ugly mask of spite. I sat back down, picking up my pen and focusing on the next line item of my audit. "No, Skylar, I'm just balancing the books. And you happen to be a massive deficit that I'm finally writing off." As the guards led her away, she screamed a string of profanities that echoed down the hall. But I just watched the gray rain continue to fall against the window. 30 days was more than enough time for them to realize that the bank account was closed. The locks were changing, and the daughter they thought they owned had finally gone public. A week after the bank incident, I was sitting in a dim corner of a high-end bistro when Martha and George marched toward my table, their faces tight with a desperate, predatory anger. "Riley, you have exactly 10 minutes to call your lawyer and drop this eviction nonsense. Or I'm going straight to your boss with proof of how you treat your own parents," Martha hissed, slamming her designer handbag onto the linen cloth. I didn't look up from my tablet, scrolling through a fraud report as I replied. "Extortion is a bold strategy for someone currently under investigation by the state's attorney for wire fraud." "Martha." George leaned over the table, his shadow looming over me as he growled. "We didn't steal anything. We just tried to access family money that you were hoarding like a greedy stranger. And no jury in Chicago will convict a father for that." I finally looked up, my eyes as cold as the ice in my water, and said, "It's not family money, George. It's a legal trust with $30,000 in assets that you tried to liquidate using a forged signature of a person you once claimed was dead." Martha's face went pale, her voice losing its edge as she stammered. "That death certificate thing was a misunderstanding. A mistake on the paperwork. And you can't prove we had anything to do with it." I slid a manila folder across the table, revealing the high-resolution scans provided by Mr. Harrison. "The bank's legal department doesn't believe in misunderstandings, Martha. And they've already matched the ink on that $30,000 withdrawal request to the pens found in your home office." George grabbed the folder, his hands shaking as he shouted, "You're really going to let them put your mother in a cage over a trip to the Maldives? You're the one who's committing a crime against blood." I stood up, adjusting my watch with clinical precision, and answered, "I'm not the one pressing charges. The bank is, because they have a fiduciary duty to protect my assets from criminals, even the ones I share a last name with. Riley, please. We can settle this quietly. Just tell them it was an authorized test of the system or something," Martha pleaded, her voice cracking as she reached for my hand. I pulled away, my tone sharp and final as I said, "I don't negotiate with fraudulent debtors. And I certainly don't lie to federal investigators to cover for people who wished me dead for a payout." George snarled, his desperation turning into a pathetic, hollow threat as he yelled, "If we go down, we're taking your reputation with us. We'll tell everyone what a monster you are." I smiled, a brief and terrifying flash of teeth, as I leaned in and whispered, "Go ahead, George. But remember that my firm specializes in reputation management, and yours is already worth less than $0. I walked away without looking back, leaving them to face the reality that the trap they set for my future had snapped shut on their own lives. As I reached the exit, my phone buzzed with a notification from the bank's fraud unit confirming that the police had been dispatched to their current address for questioning. I felt no surge of guilt, only the immense relief of a long overdue audit finally reaching its conclusion. They wanted to spend my inheritance on a fantasy, I murmured to myself while stepping into a waiting car. Now they can spend their time explaining the reality to a judge. The city lights blurred past the window, a shimmering grid of accountability that they could no longer escape. My phone rang one last time, a frantic call from Skylar, but I simply blocked the number, effectively deleting the last remaining line item of a toxic debt. The fraud trap was empty, and for the first time in 32 years, I was no longer the bait. The deadline on the eviction notice expired on a humid Tuesday afternoon, and I watched through a remote security feed as court officers removed the last of Martha's designer luggage from the Gold Coast apartment. My parents and Skylar stood on the sidewalk, surrounded by boxes that looked pathetic against the backdrop of the luxury high-rise they could no longer afford. Martha called me one final time, her voice broken and stripped of its usual venom as she whispered, "Riley, we're at a motel near the airport. George can't walk." And Skylar's credit cards were declined at the front desk. "Please just send $5,000 to get us through the month." I leaned back in my office chair, watching the movers change the locks on my screen, and replied, "That $5,000 doesn't exist for you anymore, Martha, because every cent of my liquidity is now tied up in the legal fees for your upcoming fraud trial." George grabbed the phone, his voice a hollow rasp as he begged, "You're really going to watch us rot in a shelter for the sake of a $30,000 fund?" I closed the laptop lid, cutting off the visual of their collapse, and said, "I'm not watching at all. George, I'm moving on." A month later, the Cook County State's attorney formally charged Martha with attempted wire fraud and document forgery, citing the bank's evidence as irrefutable. Skylar vanished into a cycle of low-rent apartments on the outskirts of the city, her influencer dreams replaced by the harsh reality of a minimum-wage service job. My father's chronic health issues, once used as a weapon for guilt, became a genuine burden they had to carry without my bank account as a safety net. Mr. Harrison called to confirm that the $30,000 had been successfully moved to a new, protected entity under my sole control. The audit is complete. Riley, they are officially insolvent and out of your life, he stated with professional finality. I looked at the shimmering Chicago skyline and realized that for the first time, I didn't see a grid of debts and obligations, but a map of possibilities. The Thorne family legacy was a pile of ashes, and I was the only one who had walked out of the fire. I stood at the window of my new office in Denver. The crisp mountain air, a stark contrast to the stagnant toxicity I had left behind in Chicago. The $30,000 trust fund, once a target for my family's greed, was now the seed money for my own independent consulting firm. My assistant walked in, setting a fresh coffee on my desk and asking, "Miss Thorne, the first quarterly growth report is ready. Would you like to review the projections?" I smiled, looking at the clear blue horizon, and replied, "Let's see the numbers." Because for the first time, they actually belong to me. Choosing to value yourself is never a selfish act. It is the most noble responsibility a person can have to their own survival. I realized that my grandfather hadn't just left me money. He had left me a lesson in boundary management. "Riley, you look different today. Almost at peace," my colleague remarked during our afternoon briefing. I adjusted my blazer and answered, "That's because I finally stopped being an unpaid creditor to people who never intended to pay me back. I am no longer a sacrifice for a family that viewed my success as a shared ATM. I am building a future on my own terms, where every dollar earned is a testament to my freedom." Thank you for watching Riley's journey of reclaiming her life and assets. If you believe that setting firm boundaries with toxic family is a necessity for survival, please subscribe to our channel for more stories of justice. Your support helps us bring these powerful narratives to life. Thank you for being part of our community.